This is Aaron Rice with Maryland Climate Tech 2026. Wow. This is our third year, and we've got Khalid Malik here for his third year presenting as a subject matter expert. I can't thank you enough for that, Khalid. And we've got two new subject matter experts joining us as well. Cari, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Let us know who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Hey everybody, I am Cari Harris. I work across a couple of different domains. I am an entrepreneur and I work at the intersection of inclusive economic development, sustainability, and stakeholder engagement. I am the founder of the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit, as well as the Butterfly Effect. With the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit, we aim to increase economic impact around the region, focused on climate, clean energy, sustainability, and we convene a summit every year of about 300 folks. We doubled our speakers in 2025 compared to 2024, so we're really excited about hosting our 2026 summit. And we also aim to send out a bunch of grants and develop partnerships so more funding can come into our region around these issues. And with the butterfly effect, I support businesses, nonprofits, governments, and universities with program implementation, stakeholder engagement, as well as data analytics. So really excited to be here with Khalid and Mary to talk about everything going on in Maryland.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Mary, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Let us know who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Okay, thank you, Erin. I'm really excited to be here. So I am Mary Thomas. I'm the director of the Building Innovation Hub, and the Hub, as we call it, we are a program of the national nonprofit called the Institute for Market Transformation. But the Hub, I mentioned IMT is national. The Hub is really local. We focus on DC, Maryland, and Virginia with the DC metropolitan region in particular about supporting building stakeholders, really anyone in the life cycle of a building, whether you're an owner, property manager, engineer, consultant, you name it. We are here to help with your building performance goals, making your buildings more energy efficient, healthier, more resilient, more sustainable, and with a particular focus on the building energy performance standards. They've been around in DC for many years now. We're at the end of the first cycle, and that's actually where the Hub was founded to support buildings in DC with the building energy performance standards. But with Maryland, with the BEPS now a requirement for buildings to meet, the Hub is also expanding our support into Maryland and trying to help out right now with benchmarking, third-party verification, and of course, eventually BEPS compliance. So taking lessons learned from DC, applying them to Maryland, and really just trying to lift all boats, raise the floor, and help everyone with what they need to be successful. So really happy to be here, and yeah, thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for lending your voice to the conversation. Khalid, you're an OG, man. This is welcome back for your third year supporting climate tech. I appreciate you.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for having me. We've been doing this for a little while now and got to know each other pretty good. And I want to just send a shout out to you. We appreciate you engaging us. Know this is a lot of work putting this together. So kudos to you and your platform. For those who haven't witnessed some of our previous get-togethers, I'm Khalid Malik. Been in the energy space for 16 years. The past 5 years, we established GEMCOM. I'm the executive director, and really our focus is on community serving markets. We work in and outside of Maryland. As you know, Maryland's a very progressive minded state, very fertile. Mary mentioned BEPS. And so what we do is we help fill the gaps between information from the technical and the financial perspective, and offer guidance to sectors that include affordable housing, retail, shopping centers, your faith-based organizations. So any type of community servings that facilities, we primarily provide support. That's not to say we won't work with any other type of commercial properties, but we see that there's a need, and so that's what primarily why we established our operations. Of course, we're looking to engage other like-minded organizations such as IMT, as well as the Butterfly Effect to help us kind of build out that infrastructure, that framework so that we can expand our reach into the community and engage as many building owners, operators as possible to help move that needle. And so this is very exciting work. Everything is lining up. I know there's a shortage of resources from the federal side, but that's where we come in to play, where we make work with being very creative and innovative in our approach. And so happy to kind of exchange our notes and pick each other's brains on this call.
I think last year's presentation, the thesis was how to find funding when federal funding is not easy to find. And you've been very resilient and creative in being able to get some grant funding, colleague. Can you talk a little bit about some recent successes that you've had with some of your grants?
Yeah, sure. I know I mentioned some of our clients, but higher ed is one of our focuses now. We're working with a couple institutions in Maryland, and so recently we've gotten some awards through the MEA program, Higher Education Clean Energy program. This is the second cycle for Morgan State winning an award,
Go
and
Bears.
yeah. And so the first cycle for Bowie. So we're very excited to work on campus, help them put together a master plan, leverage resources. It's a capital stack game, right? Between the utility incentives, state sources, and then just everything in between. We're very familiar with navigating those processes and putting our supporters in a leverage position to win. So
Absolutely.
very
Absolutely.
excited about that. And more importantly, getting students involved. Student engagement is at the top of what we
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
because there's so much opportunity out here, especially with the BEPS. Where are we at? 14,000 buildings that have to be optimized over the next 5 years. So that's a great opportunity to get students involved, a number of learning opportunities. And so that's where we see ourselves making the most impact.
Absolutely. So we're throwing a lot of acronyms out there, which us building energy performance kind of nerds and geeks tend to do from time to time. But for those that are newer to the space, Maryland has the most aggressive climate law in the country. All of our buildings, 35,000 square feet or more, need to be net zero by 2040, and so it's called the Building Energy Performance Standard, otherwise known as BEPS. Mary's right. DC got a very early, DC and Montgomery County were very early on with this. But the reason that we started Climate Tech Plus actually in 2024 was because as a commercial practitioner, I wasn't hearing from a lot of building owners or corporate tenants that they even knew what this law was. And so we wanted to bring, different subject matter experts to the table from across the globe to be able to talk about what they're doing in their respective countries and jurisdictions, what's working, what's not working, so that we created a kind of a knowledge base for building owners and policymakers as to how to facilitate this law. So I've sent a couple of questions to the panelists in advance. I got accused of assigning homework. That was not my intent, but I wanted to kind of dive deep a little bit. Maybe my first question is, you know, Anthony Malkin is the was the executive director of the Empire State Realty Trust, and he's the owner of the Empire State Building, the world's most famous building, 2.8 million square feet. And back in 2009, he did a deep energy retrofit of the building, and actually wrote a playbook on how older historic buildings can actually, do retrofits. It wasn't necessarily the law back in 2009. It was not the law in 2009 in New York. Of course, they currently have Local Law 97. But what do you think, Cari, building owners and policymakers can learn from what Anthony Malkin did with the Empire State Building in Manhattan?
Thank you for that question. Just to be a little clear, I am more of like an expert, I would say, on coalition building and governance and economic impact. So when I think about the actual like standards and science of this, I'm like, wow, you guys are over my head a little bit. Way over my head.
That's okay. That's all right. You're in the right place. You're in the right place because it does take a collective effort to get this done. Hence, the summit that you host every year as well. So it definitely takes a collective effort. Mary, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of the renovations that happened, but you don't really have to be like a technical expert on what they did in 2009, over 15 years ago, to know that that was a really landmark example of a successful building retrofit, especially, with a historic building, a historic landmark building. I mean, in Maryland, there are a lot of historic buildings. I think, Aaron, you were the one telling me that Baltimore has more historic buildings than anywhere.
New York and DC combined. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think a real lesson from that, the energy retrofits at the Empire State Building is you can take a historic building and a really famous one with a lot of people who care a lot about the outcome of that building, and you can have a successful renovation project that dramatically reduces energy usage. I think, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it really exceeded its goals even in terms of how much energy
Mhm.
was reduced. So, I think that there's a story there of it's possible, and especially when you're looking at the historic lens, and and so yeah, that's one of the biggest takeaways I would take from this.
Yeah, absolutely. If folks, if you haven't, who are watching, if you haven't kind of dove into what Anthony Malcolm did at the Empire State Building, I highly encourage you to do it. If you have not toured the Empire State Building, I definitely encourage folks to do that as well. It's probably one of those amazing experiences from a curation perspective of how they curate the tour. But yeah, they did exceed their goals both in regards to return on investment, payback period, energy reduction. And the health and wellness of the building as well, which is, I think, a major focus. I think LinkedIn was one of their tenants that started out with about 3,500 square feet and expanded to 600,000 square feet. One of the only buildings that actually did not close during COVID as well, because they were very much focused on the health and wellness of the building occupant. Khalid, you want to take a crack at that Empire State Building? Have you investigated that at all?
Yeah, well, so I've never personally been to the Empire State Building, but you're absolutely right. It's a huge um I would say pillar in New York City. Um and I think, Anthony, Mr. Malkin was a pioneer in what he was doing. He was ahead of his time. The biggest thing that stood out to me and which is relevant today is the aggregation of measures, right? Like, there was a certain original set of measures that they targeted, but then they settled on a few measures that had high impact.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so based on that small aggregated group of measures, think of it like the 80/20 rule, right? Like 80% of these measures
Hmm.
or 20% of these measures are going to give you 80% of the savings. And so that's what they selected. And so that's kind of the approach that we take today when we're evaluating a building, looking at, which measures are going to take the highest impact. Um, and it was interesting to read, because I wasn't familiar up until the assignment about how they start off with a budget. They already had their mind made up about, this is the ceiling, but how do we get this payback down? And so, it went into how they utilize space on each floor, and then looked at offsetting measures, windows versus the chiller system to accommodate the new open floor layout. So it was very exciting. But again, I mean, anytime you're looking at, optimizing buildings, you want to make sure that you're looking at your low to no cost measures because the weatherization, those items that are so small can sometimes have the largest impact, right? And so we see that opportunity, and that's what we start with, just to get building owners and operators comfortable. Is like, what's the low-hanging fruit? I know that's kind of been the term that's been thrown around, cliche-ish. But they're absolutely right. Let's start with that, build the trust, and then work towards some larger measures to kind of help everything absorb and buy down that payback period.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that Anthony Malkin and JLL worked on there with the retrofit was, overcoming the what's known as the split incentive, which basically, boils down to the property owner maybe not wanting to do capital improvements to the property that would benefit the tenant. Because they don't get any upside if the tenant is performing at a higher rate or their employees are performing better, or the tenant not making improvements in the property because they're not going to be there forever. So why would I improve the building owner's property if I don't have to? So I guess I'm curious, when we're talking about, building energy performance standards in a tenant occupied property that's above 35,000 square feet, how is your organization working around these split incentives? Khalid, we'll go back to you and work our way back around.
Yeah, no, I mean that question comes up a lot in the field. I mean, especially in the multifamily world, right? Like, in the tenant situation, I'll give you an example. Um, of course, as you laid it out, you've got the operators paying the bills, but the tenants receiving the benefits. And so to really maximize that opportunity, it's essential that you kind of lay out what's called green leases. That's one way to kind of manage the relationship, in terms of either recovering what was put out or at least creating an opportunity for the tenants to have some incentive to be more aware of usage in terms of their behaviors. And we had one project in the past where we actually recommended that they do a competition in terms of measuring performance and then offering that particular tenant or group of tenants some incentive towards rent if they hit a certain target. Of course, this has to be an individually metered unit,
Mhm.
which leads me into when you're talking about like a central plant type of multifamily situation where it's a master metered building and the benefits are really going to be aren't going to show up at the utility level for the tenants. And so when you're putting together these plans, you can't consider their behaviors. You got to focus on, improving the asset and making sure you recover that directly. So a lot of that is out of their control with under a master meter situation. But there are a number of opportunities that you see in the field, in terms of like example, condos, right? We're working with a project now where the association is receiving the funding, and
Mhm.
however the owners have to make decisions as a group, like make a group decision before they can accept the funding, and then you've got a
Mm.
few of them that are holding out because they're not really beholden like a tenant would be. Like in a tenant situation, once that decision is made, an upgrade in each space, it happens, right? Whether it's a new tenant turnover, that particular upgrade or renovation is going to occur. Well, in a condo situation, you have individual unit owners, you have individual personalities, individual.
Absentee owners.
You could have absentee owners, and so the decision-making process is not as smooth, right?
Mhm.
It's a complete buy-in. So there's pros and cons to, in the multifamily space when you have an owner-tenant situation versus association owner type of framework. So, but to your point, I mean, it's really, laying it out on the front in terms of how you're going to move forward to get the best out of everybody's participation.
Absolutely. Mary, you're in a unique situation with your affiliation with IMT and the Building Innovation Hub, the Green Lease Leaders Program. You all are fairly comfortable with green leases, and so I guess I'm curious as to how are you seeing building owners and tenants kind of navigating the split incentive issue?
Yeah, I was definitely going to mention the Green Lease Leaders, and I know Diana Lee is also participating in the Maryland Climate Tech. So tune into her video to hear a lot more. But that's definitely something, that the hub from the very beginning, we've always been promoting, educating people about green leases in order to get over this split incentive barrier. Because that's one of the complaints you hear is, I'm a building owner, but either, I've got a tenant that's running a data center or mining Bitcoin or like a residential tenant that's playing video games all day. What do I do? And I think everything Khalid mentioned was just on the nose in terms of like there really are strategies out there. There's those that might just throw up their hands and say, well, I can't control the tenants, and same thing with condos. But there are examples of other aspects where there is coordination happening. There is coordination happening among condo owners this is not quite the same scale, but like trash pickup, or maintenance of common areas, or and same thing with tenants where you know there are there's examples of how I think that sometimes there's a tendency to sort of throw up their hands with someone who doesn't really want to engage in this, but at the same time, they've somehow overcome these other challenges. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's especially in Maryland when you as a building owner have to comply with this legislation, this law. But it requires you getting information from the tenant from their energy usage. But there's nothing in the lease that says that the tenant is obligated to give it to you. So we are starting to see kind of anecdotally around the country where tenants, whether it be residential or office tenants, are actually charging the owner for that data, and then having them sign a hold harmless saying, "Hey, we got this data from a third party. Don't, sue us if it's wrong." But they're actually realizing that, I guess what's the old saying? Data is the new gold. And so, but then you've got corporate tenants who have sustainability mandates who require energy data from the owner to comply with their own mandates as well. And so it really does require a green lease to be able to negotiate these things so that it creates a win-win situation. And there are, building owners from Vornado to Empire State Building to many others, especially here in Maryland, who have figured out, how to create that win-win situation between the two. Cari, with your summit, are these the type of topics that come up? Split incentives? What are you hearing from your network of building owners, policymakers, corporate tenants?
Yeah, of course. So we, with the summit, take a participatory design approach into how we establish the content. And so what that means is we have folks fill out somewhere between a 3 and 5 questionnaire when they're registering for the summit, so we know what are they most interested in, what do they want to hear about, what are the topics that they want speakers to discuss, what are their environmental and economic priorities. And so we have gotten a lot of feedback with BEPS being of concern. We have a mix of attendees being community members as well as environmental professionals at a bunch of different institutions, universities, and organizations across the state. And so people are very, very interested. And something that's important, I would say, is to think about this work through the lens of environmental justice, right? And back when um, we're doing amazing work, I would say, in 2024, and the federal administration was of the mind that we need to have community partnership when we're planning. I think that we have to be conscious of that, right? There is no longer a requirement for projects and programs to include community member voices and think about optimizing community benefits, but it's a standard that I believe we should continue to foster despite the fact that it's not a requirement. Because ultimately, when we think about buildings where they're not owner occupied, right? And you have tenants who don't have necessarily a big say in how the infrastructure of the building goes and infrastructure planning. That is still something, right, that we should take into consideration, given they are the guests that are going to be living there for however many years. And that's the kind of work that we want to do. We want to make sure that community partnership is always top of mind. We want to make sure that community members that have been marginalized and overburdened for decades are considered when we think about planning and going forward with these different policies.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. So let's talk about sick building syndrome. Not a sexy topic, but a topic that does need to be discussed, especially when we're talking about, energy efficiency and making the building perform a lot better to comply with these laws. Prior to 1970, sick building syndrome was not a phenomenon. You didn't really find it in the ecosystem. It wasn't something that was talked about. It wasn't until the energy crisis of the 1970s that caused buildings to become a lot more tighter, use a lot less energy to try to conserve energy. But the unintended consequence was this phenomenon called sick building syndrome. The building was so tight and the ventilation was decreased that occupants started getting sick. And so I guess my biggest concern kind of coming to the space from more of a health and wellness indoor air quality monitoring perspective is it feels like we could be making a similar mistake with the building energy performance standard, thinking that just by removing combustion natural gas from buildings and making them all electric, that everything's fine. Especially since in the BEPS law, that's kind of how it's approached is that healthy indoor air, kind of comes along for the ride. It's a co-benefit of removing combustion from the building. But as you all know, I measure air quality in every building that I'm in, and I've been inside net zero buildings. I've been inside buildings that have gold, lead, platinum, gold, platinum, everything, and they don't perform well. And you don't know until you measure them. And so I guess I wanted to get your opinions on the health and wellness component because it's not part of the legislation per se, but I think there's an opportunity for focusing on the health and wellness and productivity of the occupant to really, take a holistic approach to the BEPS standard. Cari,
Yeah,
you wanna start with that?
for sure. And so, as I've mentioned before, a lot of my work in the environmental, climate, clean energy space is through the lens of people, right? I'm a social scientist. And so, my care in a lot of ways for this work is through the lens of how it impacts people, public health being one of those ways. And so, I think a lot of the work that we do through the nonprofit as well as through my consultancy is to build capacity for small organizations, nonprofits, and businesses, as well as individuals, right? Like when I think about you going into these buildings and being able to measure the air quality on your own, imagine if we had communities of hundreds and hundreds of community members that are able to take a portable air quality monitor with them to schools, hospitals, just the buildings that they're going into on a day-to-day basis, right? And we want to build capacity for that. We want to build affordable capacity for people to take control, right, in a lot of ways and own this because we know that we can't always leave it up to policy, right? A session is going on right now. There are a lot of people in Annapolis that are having discussions about a lot of policies, and a lot of things won't go through that are going to benefit community,
Mhm.
right? And so I think part of it is that political advocacy and staying in the know around what's going on with the legislation and following how it's implemented, but also empowering community to have capacity so they can do these measurements on their own, you know what I mean? And come with that data because sometimes agencies or institutions don't have capacity to like pay attention to individual neighborhoods, right? But if individual neighborhoods can build their individualized capacity together and collectively, then I think, they can work in tandem with this policy and be able to advocate for themselves with institutions.
Well said. Well said. Mary, you want to take a crack at that? How do we make sure that BEPS isn't repeating the mistakes of the energy crisis from the 1970s?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great question. And I think Creed's answer about empowering communities to collect that data and understand. And I would take that and just elaborate how there's a feedback loop, right? I mean, once you have that data, then you can take it to your policymakers and advocate for change through that. And having that data is such a critical part of it. So I would love to see that. I would love to see, more ability to monitor your own air quality in specific communities. And to more broadly answer your question, though, Erin, I think these kinds of conversations are, one way to address this, right? Just making sure that there isn't this assumption that just because it's energy efficient, it's going to be a healthy building. That you really have to be deliberate and think through what are our strategies for indoor air quality, as well as energy reduction. And in some cases, I mean, there is an energy usage associated with ventilation, which is necessary. In DC, they actually, and I might need to double check myself, but energy associated with ventilation is actually, there's a pathway where you can deduct that. But let me double check that before using that because it is so important to make sure your buildings are properly ventilated. I mean, we spend 90% of our time indoors. We're all indoors right now. And it's just not, there hasn't been as much of a focus until more recently on what those indoor air quality, our readings actually are. But there is more of an understanding on how that impacts our productivity and our overall health and wellness. And so I'm hoping that we're not going to just repeat what happened in the 70s because we know what happened in the 70s. And, designers, engineers, everyone who is working on these projects has a responsibility of making sure that there's a question asked about, well, and what are we doing about indoor air quality? Because it really is an opportunity. I mean, in tandem with whatever energy efficiency improvements you need to be making, you're already in the building, you're already working on making improvements, make sure that you're taking a holistic approach and looking at indoor air quality at the same time.
I agree. The technology has gotten to the point where we can see the air that we breathe through the data, which I think is very important. Khalid, before we get to you, I know that Mary needs to jump. So Khalid, I'm going to have you answer that question, but I want to ask Mary another question before she leaves, and she may need to leave a little bit early, which is totally fine. My question to you, Mary, is how has Harvard prepared you to do the work that you do and be in the place that you've been right now?
Well, it's been a long time since I graduated. So, I mean, it just, taught me to ask questions and keep an open mind um, and just, understand that there's a big wide world out there with a lot of people and a lot of different areas of expertise, I guess. I was not expecting that question.
That's okay. Always got one hidden in the chamber somewhere.
Yeah.
But great, you answered that perfectly. If you need to jump, please do stay as long as you can. Khalid, back to the
Great,
question in
thank you.
regards to, thank you so much. Back to the question in regards to sick building syndrome and not making the mistakes that we made in the 70s in regards to, and the mistake that's currently happening today, where we're making our buildings so airtight because we're focused on energy efficiency and not necessarily the health and wellness of the occupant. How do we make sure that we're not making that same mistake all over again with BEPS?
Well, I mean, like everyone before me, I mean, the tools are there, right? I mean, you've experienced it, you have access to the technology. The challenge is it's not required in these different policies and standards, but they're constantly adjusting to the market, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So if, to Carie's point, if we, push this enough, they can include it as a part of their standard, right? You've got your lead standards and some others that, have that award credit for having indoor air quality or occupant comfort in general. But the question becomes, what are the trade-offs, right? Because a lot of these buildings are, to your point, were made before the 70s, right? And so that stock, there's still prop challenges with ventilation. And so there becomes a trade-off, like with efficiency, or do you want to get the ventilation piece? Because the ventilation piece could cost just as much as the efficiency upgrades, right? With in terms of possibly installing like a DOAS system, getting makeup air into the building. Well, if you're going to put in a DOAS to help clean up, bring in the natural air, there is a usage that comes with that measure, right? So you're going to, even though you make all these efficiency improvements, if you look at if you're focused or you're prioritizing indoor air quality and you have to alter a building, right, to bring in, fresh air, that's going to increase the cost of that as well as the energy component of that. So that trade-off kind of offsets the efficiency. But then it gets down to the end user and what their priority is, right? Are you more on the efficient side or you more on the occupant comfort, right? And that happens on a case by case basis. It happens all the time. I mean,
That's where that split incentive comes into play as well.
well, the incentives help, right? But I
No,
mean,
the split incentive between the owner and the tenant, because the owner wants to drive down energy costs, but the corporate tenant wants a more high performing space.
right. And the owners and the operators, they make their decisions based on net operating income,
Yeah.
right? Like they want to collect checks that's their job, right? If they have to make these improvements, like if they're forced to make these improvements, like what we're in with Maryland, they'll do them reluctantly, right? But their main job is to collect money, right? So you have to incentivize them to do a lot more in terms of making these improvements. Otherwise, they're like, we don't control what happens in these spaces. We just want to make sure that that the systems are functioning. That's their primary role,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So BEPS has created a totally different way approach about business and models. And I think I mentioned earlier, decisions are made based on a decision with a master meter building is a lot different than an individual metered building. So. But related to indoor air quality and occupant comfort, I certainly think that it has a place. It just has to be integrated into the requirements. But I think their priority is save first, and then hopefully you reinvest those savings into the occupant comfort measures.
Well, I agree. I think that demand control ventilation is a great way to balance out the energy usage and savings. And also I think that if by focusing on the health and wellness of the occupant, you're actually able to charge more of a premium on the rent, and or because the organization is becoming more profitable because their tenants or their occupants, their employees are more productive, then maybe you can get a percentage of that upside as well. And so I think we're starting to see some creative ways where a building owner can and a tenant can kind of work together and make it a win-win-win situation when it comes to saving energy, but also enhancing the ventilation in the property. But with that said, as we close out, Cari, how has Morgan State prepared you to be in the seat that you're in today? Go
Oh
Bears, by the way.
man, go Bears, right? Love Morgan. The question is, where would I be without Morgan?
Mm.
Um,
I should have had you ask the
yeah.
question or prepare the questions.
No, but seriously, going into Morgan, I was in a tumultuous time, I would say, in
Mm.
life, and the chair actually of the economics department, because I have a bachelor's and a master's in econ, the chair of the department really kind of took me under her wing. Her name is Dr. Linda Bear, and she exposed me to conferences in our discipline. She helped me to get my first internship, which was at NOAA in Woods Hole, and I was studying the economic impact of aquaculture on the Cape. She helped me, to get a role at my dream job coming out of college, which was at Morgan Stanley. So I worked in investment banking for about 3 years. Um, and just being at Morgan around such Black excellence, right? High fashion, super intelligent beings. It really prepared me to go into the workplace. Worked at Morgan Stanley with some of the best, investment bankers in the world. And that was a crazy journey, I would say, within itself. But Morgan prepared me for like the real world, what it really takes to be successful. You got to be flexible, you got to be adaptable, you got to be well researched, you got to be innovative, speak up, right? Don't sit back and just listen. And my mentor, I mean, she's really been instrumental to my career in investment banking and as well as my career as an entrepreneur. So I owe most, if not all, of my success to her guidance, as well as the guidance of my family. But I am a diehard Bear. Love Morgan. Thank you if you're listening.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Khalid, you got a little Aggie pride, right?
Absolutely, all day. I mean, it's resiliency. That's what I learned, on campus. You had to make the most of what you had. It was surviving, it was fun, it was educational all at the same time. So, those moments, there were moments of joy, moments of disappointment, and all those things kind of help shape you. And, I'm speaking as a graduate student, and I just there were transferable skills, that last until today, right? And I thanked all those professors for being patient with me, and it's a staple forever, right? And Aggie born, Aggie bred. If you don't know the rest, you got to look it up. So appreciate you asking those questions, but certainly it shaped me, and it continues to, and all my associates from Aggie land, we're still in touch, and that network is a huge network that I tap into as often and as necessary as possible.
Mm. I appreciate that. My final question before I let you go, this has been awesome. When it comes to the youth and getting them engaged in this work, whether it's greenhouse gas reduction, climate resiliency, sustainability, energy reduction, healthy indoor air, especially students from our community who might think that this is just something that kind of white people do. What would you tell them, Khalid?
Yeah, no, I mean, they got to see us in it. I mean, whether it's TikTok or whatever other social media channel that they follow, you got to put it into the algorithm, okay? And the biggest thing is show them the money, and that's just any young adults out here. If you want to get their attention, you got to show them the money. So, this space isn't going anywhere. There's a lot of infrastructure improvements happening across the land. This is just one of many, but it's an area that, is on the forefront right now. So, utility costs are going to continue to go up. Buildings are going to continue to get old. There has to be, the right people in place to be able to serve. And so part of what we're doing with these higher education grants is we're creating programs, courses, curriculums to help facilitate that education and training. So I'm very excited to work and to partner with these local stakeholders, and the future is here.
Absolutely. Curry, what would you say to the youth about kind of getting into this space?
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy that I'm no longer the youth, right? You're telling me to tell the youth something. So that's a change. But I would say to think outside the box and be open. When I was in college, as I just mentioned, I wanted to be in investment banking and I wanted to work on Wall Street. And one of my best my best friend, she did a postdoc at Harvard, and one of her friends, I was talking about how I wanted to work on Wall Street. We were in San Diego at a conference, and he said, "Do you know like what kind of life they live?" And I was like, "Huh, no, I don't." And so I went to go work at Morgan Stanley, and the traders that I work with, they got into the office at like 5 a.m. and they didn't leave until like 6 or 7. And I was like, I don't think I can spend 12 hours at work every single day. And so I got out of that career, right? And I never thought that I would be, in the position that I'm in now. Um, and it's been unique for me, I will say, because I don't have to have a background in climate, environmental science, sustainability, or clean energy, but my skill set, measuring economic impact, quantitative data analytics, stakeholder engagement. Those things are valuable in this space, right? Any career path that you want to take on, you can do, right, in this industry. And so a lot of times it seems like, oh, you've got to be an environmental scientist or a marine biologist or a chemist or an engineer to be in this space. No, bring your skill set to the space. And that's how I've been able to make a name for myself in this space, by bringing my own expertise where I saw there were gaps in the market, and it's been really fruitful and really helpful for community. So that's what I would tell you guys.
Well, this video will launch on March 19th. It's not a mistake that we do this during Women's History Month. We want to uplift the women in this space that are doing great things, especially folks from HBCUs. So I appreciate that. Is there anything that I didn't ask either of you that you want people to know about the work that you do?
Yeah. One thing that I would say is, I already mentioned Dr. Linda Bear. A lot of the inspiration for the work that I do is inspired by Dr. Robert Bullard and Dr. Beverly Wright, Latricia Adams, and Peggy Shepard. They are, the environmental justice leaders right now. Bernice Miller Travis, she's an environmental justice pioneer as well. The work that they've been able to do in the South and in New York is really an inspiration for the coalition building that I'm doing here in Baltimore. So I just want to make sure that I give them a shout out. If you don't know who they are, then you really need to look them up. And I also look to the California Strategic Growth Council for inspiration as well. They do a lot of great work around partnership building and coalition building in California, and they fund that work. So hopefully one day in Maryland, we will have funds similar to those funds that literally spend money on building partnerships and having discussions like these. So thank you to all the inspirations.
Definitely scan that QR code, folks. I know that I receive emails every other day about different funding opportunities from Cari, so I appreciate that. Please do not stop. Please do not unsubscribe me. Please keep sending them. Khalid?
Yeah, no, just to piggyback on Cari, I mean, we've launched a coalition to help building owners and operators. You're a part of that, Aaron. Cari's a part of that, and we only see it as one of those pathways to create opportunities. Not only for your trades out there, but also for the students looking for direction. There's plenty of space out there to optimize, and we just want to create that vehicle to get them where they're going. And so we see this partnering with universities as a way to go about doing that. So excited about this platform, excited to work with Cari, excited to work with Mary, and just stay tuned for more.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mary Thomas from Innovation Hub, Building Innovation Hub. Shout out to Cari Harris, and shout out to Khalid Malik. Thank you so much for your time, your professionalism, your subject matter expertise. Your contact information will magically appear on the screen and post. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Have a great one. Thank you.